Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we'll be talking about validation controls provided by Microsoft Visual Studio and ASP.NET. And in particular we'll be talking about server validation. To do so, I added a few fields to our table, the table we started with last time. So I added a field for the username and the password and a confirmation for the password, in addition to other changes that I will take you quickly through in the source code. So what I did is I added another cell in all the rows except the header row and the last two rows that contains the submit button and the message label. And because these three rows have only one cell unlike the other rows, so we have to tell the table that the cells should span over two cells unlike the other rows. So you need to use the property column span. This means that this cell will span over two columns, and I would like to align the text to the center. And the same I did to the last two rows for the button. We span over two columns and the alignment horizontal element is the center. Take your time, adjust the table, and once you're done, then you can continue with this video. Since we are talking about validation controls, and since these are controls provided by Microsoft Visual Studio, so like other controls, we can find them in the window toolbox. So last time we added controls from the standard category. Now we'll be using the validation controls. We have actually more than one type of validation. I will be addressing today some of them, and in another video we'll be going also into details of one of the most important validations, which is the regular expression validator. So today we will use the compare validator, we will use the range validator, we will use the required field validator, and we will add also a validation summary. So let's start with the compare validator. As the name says, here this validator will allow us to compare either a field to a certain value, or we will compare two fields together. The range validator will allow me to check a value against a given range. The required field validator will force the user to enter a value, and the validation summary will simply display the result of the validation, or in other words, it will show me the list of the errors or the fields that did not meet a certain criteria. And as I said, in the next video I'll be talking in details about the regular expression validator. So let's say in our registration form we would like the user to enter the first name and the last name, and that these two fields are required. So to do so, all we need to do is to add a required field validator. Again, in order to add a control, we simply drag and drop the control into the cell. Okay, so this is our required field validator. It has an ID, it has an error message, and to start with, let's change the ID of this validator. So if this is a validator for the first name, then I will name it first name first name RFV required field validator. The error message is the message that you would like to display if the user did not enter a value to this field. So you can maybe use a star. So, and a couple of more properties we can change here from the properties window. We'll start with the most important one, which is the control to validate. So this validator, required field validator control, should control a certain field or a certain control. And here is the place where we specify what control are we validating. So what we need to do is we need to tell the program that we are validating the first name txt, and this is the name of the text box. So this is the first property. Another property that we need to change is the display. So we have a couple of options here. We have dynamic, none, or static. Static means that the page will reserve a place for this validator. We will choose dynamic, which means that we will only reserve a place when there is an error or when we want to display the error message. Another property that we need to change that we already did is our error message, which is this one. So we want only to display a star. You can of course display any message. Please enter your first name. First name is required. Any message you like to display. You can of course change the color. So by default the color is set to red. Okay, so we will do the same for the last name. So again we copy this, and I will quickly change this to star. Again, the control to validate will be our last name txt. So remember, this is the field we are controlling, and the display property will change it to dynamic. So this simply tells the program that we cannot proceed unless the user enters these two values. Okay, so we'll move to the age now. Age is a numerical value, so sometimes you might want to allow only users above a certain age, or users with age that falls within a certain range. Also, to do so, we have a range validator. So let's add this range validator. Okay, so you can always change the ID, the error message. Let's say we want only users between 18 and let's say 70 years old to enter or to register in our website. So if we want to do so, then let's display a message, a meaningful message. So you must be between 18 and 70 years old. Any message you like. So again, we will change the display property for this validator. So we'll change it to dynamic, the error message we already set, and the control to validate. So this would be our age txt. And range validator, we have to set the range. So we set that we want only users between 18 and 70. So this will be our minimum value and this will be our maximum value. So if we check the properties, we will see that we have a maximum and minimum values. So we'll set the maximum to 70 and the minimum to 18. And finally, the last thing we need to change is the type. So for the validator to know what type of data are we expecting, we have a couple of types. So you can validate currency, you can validate dates, you can validate decimal numbers, so doubles or integers or strings. So our age will be an integer. So that's it for the range validator. And the email username, I'll leave it to the next video. Now we want to, number one, we want to force the user to enter a password, and number two, we would like the user to confirm the password. So we need to compare the text entered in this field to the text entered in the password txt. So like we did with the first name and last name, we would like to add a required field validator. Again, I'll quickly change the properties. So our error message would be a star, then our display would be static. So let me check this again. So for some reason it's not taking the validator, so let's check this again. Okay, okay, so now we have it. So the control to validate will be our password txt, and the display method would be dynamic display property, sorry, is a dynamic. Finally, for the confirm password, as I said, we would like to check if the password is entered properly, so we need to compare the text entered here with the text already entered in the password txt. So to do so, we have this compare validator. We'll drag and drop this here. So our compare validator, let's say here our error message will say passwords don't match, or please re-enter your password. Okay, so again we will change the display method to dynamic, and now for the compare validator we have two more properties to change. So we have here the control to compare and the control to validate. So the control to validate would be the current control, which is the confirm password txt, and the control to compare is with which field we are comparing this, and this would be our original password txt, so this would be the password txt. So again, in the control to validate, this is the control we are validating, and since it's a compare validator, then we will be comparing it to another field or text box. So this would be the control to compare, and this is the password txt. Another option you have here if you want to compare to a certain value. So here, instead of controlling to another field, you can select value to compare. So you can compare this against another value. And finally, with comparisons, then we need to set the operator. So how are we comparing the two fields? For passwords, we need the two fields to be equal. So here you can see a property that is called operator, and in the operator you will see all the operators that you already know, like equal, greater than, or equal, etc. So for today we will be comparing for equality. Alright, so we have now added a required field validator, we added a range validator, and we added a compare validator. Finally, and in some cases you might want to display a summary for the whole validation. So a summary that displays all the errors. So if fields are missing or fields don't match a certain criteria, then we can of course do so. And this is done with the validation summary. To do this, let's say we will add another row exactly like this one. So Ctrl C below the message label and Ctrl V, and instead of the label here I would like to add a validation summary. So this validation summary will simply display all the errors that are still in the page. Okay, so let's see what we have done so far. Let's run. So Ctrl F5. Okay, it's taking some time and we have an error. So this error mainly says that we need a script resource mapping for jQuery. So this is easily fixed. So what we need to do is we need to go back to our Solution Explorer, and we haven't talked much about the web config. So this file in your Solution Explorer is the web configuration file. This is a file that allows you to add different configuration settings for your website. And to allow validation, we need to do the proper configuration for this. To do so, we need the following: the app settings. So you can simply copy this and paste it, paste it to your web config file. So here in the app setting, you need to add this key for validation settings. So this will allow our application to use server control validation or server validation controls. So Control F5 and the problem should be fixed. Alright, so this is our registration form again. As you see, we have the different fields. So if you remember, we want the user to enter a first name, last name, the age, we're checking for a given range, email, username, we haven't done anything so far. Password and confirm password, we want to compare these two values. Okay, before we do that, I forgot to do something, and this is for the password. Since it's a password, so we don't want people to see what password we are typing at the moment. For that, we have one property, which is the mode, text mode, and this is a password. So copy and paste to the confirm password. Alright, and run again. Okay, so let's say I will enter my name, then I will skip the last name to see what will happen. I will enter an age that doesn't fall within the required range. Email, we haven't done anything, so now we have this error message: you must be between 18 and 70 years old. Okay, if I don't change this, then the message will remain displayed, will be displayed. For the username, for the password, we have nothing. For the password and confirm password, so let's say I will enter a password. Okay, so I entered two different passwords, so now I should see the message password don't match. So only until I enter the same password, so this message will disappear. And even if you click on the submit button, so this will show you the validation summary. So here, as you can see, we have the star, which is the same one displayed here, and this is a notification that this field is required. You can of course display a meaningful message like last name is required, you must be between 18 and 70 years old, which is exactly the same message displayed here. So now it's your call. If you like to display the validation summary, then you can do so. Otherwise, you will always see the messages displayed. These are the error messages we set in the in each of these validation controls. Okay, so that's it for now. I will be seeing you in another video to explain in more details about the regular expression validator.